The blessing of the nations, the third part of our course on the Pentateuch. Blessing means God's favor, and cursing is the opposite of it. God's blessing extends to those who seek to be righteous. The wicked are under the curse. The first human enjoyed God's favor and were blessed by Him. Then, after they sinned, they experienced God's disfavor. But with Abraham, the way opens to experience God's favor again. Creator and creation in harmony. The universe was created with ease merely by speaking the word, and it was orderly. Everything was good. The humans are blessed, and the seventh day is also blessed. In the Garden of Eden, the man is molded by God. God provides the right environment for the man and a suitable companion. But then, this harmony is broken by eating the forbidden fruit. The consequence is God's displeasure. Adam and Eve are expelled from the Garden of Eden. The serpent is cursed, the ground is cursed, and the work becomes a toil. But in the midst of that story, there is a promise of a final victory. The seed of the woman will not only crush the head of the serpent, but he will also be the blessing for all the nations. Thus, in the Garden of Eden, there was a close relationship between man, Adam, and the ground, Adamah. There was also a perfect relationship between man and woman, and between God and humans. Now, these relationships are broken. Relationship between humans and nature, relationship between man and woman, relationship between God and humanity. All were affected by the sin of Adam. The tragic consequence of the sin of Adam continues outside of the Garden of Eden. Cain murdered Abel and is cursed by God. The ground will no longer yield its crop to him. He will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and he is the founder of the first city on the pages of the Bible. As God said in Genesis 3, became true in Genesis 5. The work becomes a painful toil. Finally, because the human wickedness, God decides to wipe the humankind from the face of the earth. The flood story is undoing of the first creation. As in the first creation story, the waters were covering everything, so now the waters are covering everything again. We are back to the chaos that existed at the beginning of creation. But Noah finds favor with God, and there is a promise of never cursing the ground because of humans. So the ground emerges again from the waters, and Noah is blessed by God. The world is renewed, but unfortunately, the human nature is not. The first human blessing and curse. Till now, it was God who was blessing and cursing. With Genesis 9, Noah blesses Shem and Japheth, but curses Ham's son Canaan. Here, Noah's words carries divine authority. From here onwards, those within the chosen line are divinely empowered to bless or curse others. However, later on in the New Testament, Jesus is telling us very clearly that we are called to bless, not to curse. From the story of Noah, the line of Shem gets prominence. Abraham comes from the line of Shem, and his descendants will take possession of the land occupied by the Canaanites, cursed by Noah. Abraham and the blessing of the nations. The story of Abraham begins in Genesis chapter 11:27 and ends in chapter 25 verse 11. With Abraham entering the stage, God desires to bless humanity and to reverse the divine curses under which they live. But the fulfillment of this promise is conditional on Abraham's obedience. Since divine curses were due to humans' disobedience, so in order to reverse it, Abraham has to be obedient. There is another problem that stands as a barrier against this promise. Sarah cannot have children. It will be God to make Abraham's name great, not Abraham himself. And those who disdain Abraham will be cursed. Through Abraham, God's blessing will be mediated to all the families of the ground. Melchizedek, the king of Salem and the priest of the Most High God, blesses Abraham and so gets the tithes. Abimelech, the local king, enters into covenant with Abraham, noticing Abraham's special relationship with God. Abraham proved himself, and so after the last test of his obedience, God repeats his promise of blessing. Finally, the story ends with Abraham being blessed in every way. He is rich, he is old and satisfied with his life, and he has descendants. Blessing in the reminder of Genesis. God's blessing is closely associated with prosperity. In case of Jacob, for example, he became rich despite the attempts of his uncle Laban to limit his wealth. The same is true of Joseph. Sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused and imprisoned, he ends as the second to Pharaoh. God's blessing is associated with fertility as well. In Abraham's story, the lack of fertility is the setting against which the Lord promises that Abraham will become a great nation. And there is also the power to mediate God's blessing to others through the chosen line of patriarchs. So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, each one is blessed by God, but then they also can pass that blessings to others. For example, Laban notices that he is blessed because of the presence of Jacob in his house. Potiphar, the master of Joseph, notices the same thing. When Joseph is thrown into prison, the prison warden realizes that the presence of Joseph changes everything. And Egypt can survive famine and other nations also precisely because of Joseph. When Jacob and his whole family goes down to Egypt to Joseph, Pharaoh gives them the best part of the land. And Jacob, the patriarch of the family, blesses the mighty king of Egypt. The importance of blessing by the father of his firstborn is seen in the story of Esau and Jacob. Jacob steals the blessing that's supposed to go to his older brother Esau. In Genesis 48, we have the story of Jacob blessing his two grandsons, the sons of Joseph, and he gives the greater blessing to the younger one and the lesser blessing to the elder one, which displeases Joseph. Genesis 49 records for us the blessing of the sons of Jacob. The greatest blessing receives Judah, the fourth son of Jacob. The three sons that preceded Judah, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, did not get that blessing because they committed sins. In the blessing given to Judah, we read, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, so that tribute shall come to him, and the homage of peoples be his." There is an expectation that through a future royal descendant from the tribe of Judah, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. How does this story of blessing connects with New Testament? Acts of the Apostles chapter 3 includes first sermon of Peter to his fellow Israelites. In this sermon we hear such statement: "You are sons of the prophets and of the covenant which God made with our fathers, saying to Abraham, and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. To you first, God, having raised up his servant Jesus, sent him to bless you in turning away every one of you from your iniquities." Jesus is the one through whom God's blessing will come to others, first to the people of Israel. But then Paul, in the letter to the Galatians, includes the same statement, saying that the blessing given to Abraham comes to the Gentiles through Jesus Christ. Thus, Jesus is the seed of Abraham. Jesus is the son of David, in whom all the nations will be blessed.